Halloween, the movie that is labeled as the first definitive slasher. Despite its tiny budget, it was a huge success, which led to many different movies giving the slasher genre a shot. From 1978 to 1984, when people mentioned horror movies, they were most likely talking about slashers specifically. This era was called the Golden Age of Slashers, with characters like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger becoming iconic horror mascots. But eventually, people started getting tired of the same repeated sets of cliches, and the movies were getting progressively shittier. Kinda like how people feel about superhero movies nowadays. 1984 marked the downfall of slashers. Fatigue hit the horror genre, and the average moviegoers just weren't interested anymore. Until the release of one movie that changed everything. To say Scream was an important movie is an understatement. After its release in 1996, Scream became the highest-grossing slasher film at the time. It both revived and reinvented not just the slasher subgenre, but also had a huge effect on horror movies. So much so that 1996 started the post-Scream era, where many movies tried to be like Scream, but most of them failed miserably. So, what exactly made Scream so unique? Well, there's a short answer, but I won't give it to you just yet. So here's the long answer instead. Spoilers. The movie starts with Casey Becker, all alone in her house, until she gets a phone call from a stranger.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
The stranger happens to have quite a lot of riz.
So, you got a boyfriend?
Why, you want to ask me out on a date?
Maybe.
They start talking about scary movies, and then the stranger says the famous line,
What's your favorite scary movie?
Halloween. You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
Oh, wow! That is relatable!
This might not sound very impressive nowadays, but Scream was one of the first horror movies aware of other horror movies. Throughout its runtime, there are countless references to other iconic slashers and just other horror movies in general. A common complaint about slashers was that the characters act as if they've never watched a horror movie before. But in Scream, characters are fully aware of other horror movies, as if they live in our world, which makes them a lot more sympathetic, but also plays a major part later in the movie. After some scary talk, the conversation starts to get creepy.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
What follows is a genuinely thrilling scene as Casey tries to stall for time until her parents come back home. But sadly, they arrive just late enough to hear her last breaths, before discovering the brutal scene of their daughter's dead body. Usually in slashers, characters lack depth, so in scenes like this the audience is actually rooting for the killer. But in Scream we spent the entire opening following Casey around, and we had no idea about the killer's identity, so we were rooting for her to survive. This scene was especially shocking because Casey's actress, Drew Barrymore, was the biggest name in the cast, and her face was all over the promotional material, making people think she was the main character and the final girl, but she died right away. The first instance of Scream subverting expectations. Eventually, we meet our actual protagonist, Sidney Prescott, who is pretty upset because Casey used to sit next to her in class. Then we meet her friends while they're talking about Casey's murder, with as much respect as you'd think.
Did you really put her liver in the mailbox? Because I heard that they found her liver in the mailbox.
Liver alone. Ow, liver. It was a joke.
Very accurate to how people react to tragedy nowadays. As far as the characters go, there is a bunch of likable and colorful characters in this movie, and one of them is likely the killer. Remember, this time around, we actually don't know who the killer is, which makes Scream a whodunit. Usually in slashers, the identity of the killer is known right away. We'd never ask who's behind Michael Myers' mask, because, well, it's Michael Myers. We got Billy Loomis, Sidney's boyfriend, who the movie goes out of its way to make look suspicious. Billy's best friend is Stu, a rich kid who tries way too hard to be funny all the time.
How do you gut someone?
You take a knife. Hey, it's called tact, you fuck rag.
Matthew Lillard, who played Stu, cringes while looking back on his performance, but I gotta say, I think he served his role very well. Then we got Randy. Randy is a horror movie geek who is convinced this whole situation is going according to the horror movie formula.
There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
He might not be that off though. We'll get back to Randy. And as for the killer himself, Ghostface managed to sit there next to the other iconic horror mascots. Ironically enough, what makes Ghostface so special is that he isn't special. His iconic costume was purchased from a Halloween store. Even in real life, they got the rights to the mask from Fun World, a small costume company in New England. There's a regular guy behind that mask and he gets damaged pretty easily. There isn't even just one Ghostface. Scream's biggest twist ends up being that the whole time we were looking for their killer, there was actually two of them. After rewatching the movie, you realize so many tiny details. Like how Billy had Stu's back when he was accused.
Thanks, buddy.
How Stu was checking his head for bruises after headbutting Sydney last night. And how Stu accused Sydney's dad of being the killer.
You know, I think it's her father.
While they were planning on framing him. Funny how Randy was basically right the whole time.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'll be right back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
You see, you push the laws and you end up dead. Okay, I'll see you in the kitchen with a knife.
To circle back to the beginning, Halloween made the term slasher into what it is today, because it established most of the tropes and cliches that the future slashers followed. What made Scream so special was that it broke those cliches and subverted the audience's expectations. Scream knew the rules, and instead of following them religiously, it celebrated them. Scream managed to be a commentary on the recent lackluster slashers, and an actually damn good slasher itself, with well-written and likable characters who can actually be funny and entertaining. You might have noticed how I haven't mentioned any of the sequels yet. It's because I don't like any of them. I wish Scream had never gotten a sequel. Scream will always have a special place in my heart. I just think it's such a shame that the movie famous for breaking cliches went on for so long that it became cliché itself.